evening and welcome to the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education special meeting for Thursday, January 16th, 2020. Would you please call the roll? Oh, excuse me, has this meeting been properly noticed?
It has.
Would you please call the roll?
Harlan? Here. Evans?
Here.
Garner?
Here.
Herzog?
Here.
Olmsted?
Here.
Heschel? Salaji?
Here.
We have a quorum.
Thank you very much. We are missing one board member who is on his way and should be here in about 8 minutes, I'm guessing. So at this time, I would like to ask for a recess, and that would need a second so that we may go into a 7-minute recess. We'll all be sitting here, but we are waiting for our 7th board member to join us tonight.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
All right, so we will be in a recess until approximately 6:10 this evening. Thank you.
The Oshkosh Board of Education is currently in a break. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. This is GovTV, opening accessibility and understanding of local government, helping you to be informed and involved. Also streaming live and on demand at oshkoshmedia.org and radio simulcast on Oshkosh FM 101.9. Like us on Facebook at our Oshkosh Media page. For a schedule of all GovTV programming, visit our website at oshkoshmedia.org. Please stay with us. Coverage will resume shortly.
All right, excuse me, after that brief recess, now that we have all 7 board members here, we will come back into open session. We are here tonight to consider 2 individually considered resolutions related to a potential referendum. Since we last met, there have been some comments from the community.
I think we need to open up the resolution.
Okay, we can certainly do that. I was just giving a little intro. But we can do that. All right, we have 2 individually considered resolutions. The first is initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $24,515,000. We also have resolution number 2, providing for a referendum election on the question of the approval of an initial resolution authorizing
It's all good. Keep going.
the issuance of general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $24,515,000. These are individual resolutions, and so I will read the first one. It would require both being moved and seconded, and then it would be open for discussion. Resolution number 1, be it resolved that the Oshkosh Area School District Board of Education approve initial resolution authorizing general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $24,515,000. Be it resolved by the School Board of the Oshkosh Area School District, Winnebago County, Wisconsin, that there shall be issued pursuant to Chapter 67 of the Wisconsin statutes, general obligation bonds in an amount not to exceed $24,515,000 for the public purpose of paying the cost of a district-wide school facilities improvement project consisting of safety and security improvements, including office relocation and/or entrance remodeling, building communication upgrades and security cameras, building infrastructure improvements, including electrical, HVAC, generator, and fire alarm system upgrades, and auditorium rigging, and acquisition of related furnishings, fixtures, and equipment.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, now we can launch into discussion. Since we last met, there has been some feedback from a number of sources within the community expressing concern about not having a more clearly communicated long-range plan on all of our facilities. And so I will turn this over to Dr. Cartwright to relate some of the feedback she has received and then open it up for other board members to weigh in.
And if it's okay, if possible, I'd like to invite Dr. Gunlock and Ms. Schnorr also to the
Sure.
table to answer questions and to contribute to the conversation of the board for this evening. As you know, the survey that was conducted within the community was from October. Since that time, the results of the survey had indicated that the community wanted some additional information related to the second half of what was being proposed from Phase 1 related to the Facility Advisory Committee. Dr. Gunlock, myself, have been continuing to have multiple conversations across the community on an ongoing basis, and Dr. Gunlock has had multiple conversations internally as well, and ensuring that our staff members are becoming more aware of what's happening. And we're continuing those conversations, and will continue with those conversations as to what this means for the second half of Phase 1 on that approach. In most recent conversations with some of our community leaders as well as community members, a lot of those individuals are saying, okay, now I'm starting to really understand this, starting to really get this. This is a really important topic. However, we really think that you probably need to go for one ask on one referendum rather than breaking it apart into two asks and two referendums. So we wanted to ensure that the board had the most recent information so that you can make an informed decision this evening and talk about this amongst yourselves and what your reactions are to this information. Because based off that more recent information, from our administrative standpoint, we are in the position now where we would probably, we are going to modify our recommendation to you to say that it probably would be in the best interest of our community, given the most recent information, and that we are making positive momentum in this, to look at more, rather than an April referendum with just part 1 of Phase 1, to look at a November referendum for the whole thing of Phase 1. In addition to that, it will allow us to continue to work on that long-term facilities plan, which Dr. Herzog was referring to. So that way our community will know here, hopefully as we continue to make recommendations and present information to the board related to the Facility Advisory Committee's recommendations to you, that we will be able to develop that long-term facility plan that the community has asked us for, and we continue to inform and bring our community along with us. If I may, Dr. Gunlock, Ms. Schnorr, is there any additional information?
Yeah. I drew the short straw, so I'm going first. I think, as Dr. Cartwright said, we've had quite a few conversations with people since originally we were going through this a few months ago. There's been some discussion around the idea of, okay, there were 4 main parts that the community was surveyed on. The referendum that you have before you is parts 1 and 2, safety and security and infrastructure. The reconstruction of a middle school and reconstruction of a elementary school was something that the community said they supported. However, they wanted a lot more information on. So when you look at that, the idea of we would be coming back with a recommendation to replace those 2 schools at a future time in any event. The idea of putting those 2 back together and then potentially doing that in November, and then having a much longer runway for us to begin to do what the community also said. Please give us more information so that we can understand the overall picture and how this fits into the overall picture and why this is a good, coherent, stepwise fashion in terms of preparing our facilities for the future, because we have a lot of work to do in our facilities, and that would be a very nice first step.
So with that, I'll turn this back over to Dr. Herzog and to the board.
I'll just make a brief comment and then open it up to the rest of the board. I always feel like we and I try to make the best decision I can at the time with the information I have, and that you have or we have as a board. In view of some recent information that has come to us, asking for more information and a more complete picture of what the facilities needs are beyond the security and safety, which we believe are significant and believe that, according to school perceptions, would be supported in an April election, along with changes to our infrastructure, which, again, school perceptions feel would be supported by our community. But it's a bigger picture than that, and we don't want to leave the community with the idea that those are the only needs in the community. This board has been looking at facilities going back in a major way to 2017, when we had authorized a study by Bray and Associates to look at all of our buildings. They looked at roofs, they looked at infrastructure, foundations, and a variety of things, tuck pointing, mostly physical or structural needs, which didn't even begin to touch the different ways that we educate children today and the spaces we need for social workers, PBIS administrators, or teachers, and so on, counselors, special ed rooms, and so on. And so I believe that our community is now asking for us to take a pause here and to take a look at what is the big picture of all of the things we say we need in the short term and in the longer term. So with that, I will be happy to open it up to comments or questions from other board members.
I have some. A
Mrs.
bunch,
Olmsted,
actually.
absolutely.
Of course I do. So just so I'm understanding, so recently we've heard, because we've had time to start to educate people about the long-term plan and what we really want to do in consolidating schools, we've had, and that was, the survey came back and said that people supported
Yes.
only if they had more information. And now we're giving more information so people are understanding. So we're getting feedback that they want the whole thing, that we think we can do that instead of piecemealing it, which I do worry about referendum fatigue. If we go in April, then we come back to the second part, then we're going to operational. I do worry that no matter what referendum we bring up, they're going to say no because we've had too many. So it's kind of like, this is all of it, this is a package on the bigger, this is not just part one of phase one, this is all of phase one. I think that our community, understands that more. I think that they would get it better. A question I have though is, how does the FAC feel about this? Because they came to us and they gave us their recommendation.
Right.
Do they feel that, they came and gave us the recommendation, but with hesitancy, because from what I understood with them, they would rather go for the whole thing too. Do you think that they would feel this way, that we should, with your recommendation? I guess, what are you guys from,
Well,
Dr. Cartwright just said that she would recommend we go for, we pull
Right.
back now. So is that what the FAC would feel too?
I can't necessarily speak for what the FAC would say today, but what I can do is share what they said at our last couple of meetings.
Okay.
And they had hoped that there was enough support to immediately go in April for all 4 parts of phase one. I think
Right.
they were dismayed as we were. We were kind of hoping people were already that far down the road.
Yeah.
So I think and there were conversations that were had. Should we not just press forward, and should we not just really go double down on the education of the community to make sure that we get all the information out there and go for it? And I would not recommend that. I know School Perceptions would not recommend that. But that was when we were looking at an April time slot.
Okay.
When you're looking at a November time slot, that means we have a much longer runway and we have an opportunity to conduct that education of the community, make sure everybody's aware. And also remember, the survey we used did not give you an alternative. It said, are you supportive of doing this? It didn't say, or what.
Right.
Because there is an or what here. There's a $127 million or what. And that is the dollars we'd have to put into our facilities. Let's take Merrill Middle as an example, and we would still have a 119-year-old building after we put that all in. Now, it would have elevators, but it would still be a 119-year-old building with elevators.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that's important for the community to realize too, is that we will need to, there is no option to not spend money on our facilities. The question is, what do you want to spend it on, and what is the most cost-effective package that delivers on the promise that we provide to all of our kids in preparing them for the future?
Okay. So it does give us a longer leeway to November, but how soon can the administration team be prepared to give us the long-term, the entire plan? Like, how close are we to that plan?
It's ready.
Yeah.
We've had that plan.
Right.
If you look at the materials that are on the website, there's probably 85 to 90% of the plan is already there.
Right.
It's in draft form because obviously there's a lot of
The moving
things that would
section.
have to be done, and many of them are hinged on renovation and reconstruction, which would require a referendum because you don't have that in your operational budget to spend those larger chunks of dollars.
How long is that term? How long is that plan? That is out how many years? Like, what did we put a time frame on? Because I know
We
phase one
We didn't really
was-
put a time frame on it, but
Okay.
if I were to put it together in my head right now, I'd say you're looking at anywhere from a 10 to 20 year
Okay.
type of plan.
Okay.
And that's going to, the length of the runway is really going to be dependent upon the community's appetite for speed in doing this. So the cool part about this particular type of situation is once you have what the end looks like, you can backwards design, and you can make that longer or shorter as the community wants to make it longer or shorter. But I do think there's a value in giving the community the end point. This is what the Oshkosh Area School District of the future is going to look like in terms of quantity of facilities and how they would be structured in order to accommodate the needs of our kids.
And the
then
quality of
how,
them.
yeah, how
Yeah.
long we get there,
Okay.
you know, that's going to be a variable, but it's a good place to start.
And it's also one of those things to where we're prepared to start these conversations with the board because we want to ensure that we're very systematic in our approach. So for example, coming forward to the board, one of the FAC recommendations was going from 20 schools to 14 schools. Consolidate. Okay, well, what does that really mean? And making sure that our community understands that consolidate is not necessarily what we were able to do between Smith and Jefferson. That we may have some room to do some of that, but for the most part, the capacity of the facilities are just too small. Plus, some of them are just so old. And so it's workshopping, making sure that the board understands that we're ready to do that, and then allow the board to commit to whatever
What the
it
plan
may be,
is, yeah,
right?
and how we do that.
And we may segment that plan out, so that way there's commitment along the way, so that we can get to a long-term master plan
Okay.
I
in
think-
the near future.
I think the other message that needs to get out is the fact that consolidation is best for students. I mean, when you look at a students first mentality, consolidation allows us to apply the most resources the most effectively to the most children. That's the end result of all of this. So,
And if it's an issue of equity, which our community has been telling us for a really long time, year after year after year, and to me, I wonder why we would wait if we now have a plan and the community has come up with that plan. And then I know that the survey said April might be too fast, however, if with more information, maybe. I mean, there's a lot of things that this now addresses that we have been struggling with and been challenged with for a really long time. So
Mhm.
I like that, again, if we do our job and think about how this impacts students, then.
Yeah.
Your comments or questions?
I have a comment.
Mr. Pressure.
Sure. First, I think I want to start off with indicating that the discussion of referendum ultimately is rooted in an exercise in democracy. That exercise is participation in that process and providing your community authority to be able to move forward to improve whatever that question's based about. And so, I think we initiated that exercise in democracy in indicating that we need to put this question out there. We need to gauge how the community feels about that, allow them to communicate to us and communicate to staff and administration, and I think that's the important part of this. I'm very comfortable not moving forward at this point because we've engaged. And I think that's the important part to take from all of this is that we have been engaging for several months and almost a good part of a year at this point, over a year, if we go back to how this discussion started with the abrupt closing of a school. So I think it's really important that our body, our school board, is acknowledging this exercise in democracy and participation. Though there's no residents here or citizens here to talk about it, we've received phone calls. I think we're all on Facebook. I think we probably most likely spent some time reading about Facebook. We all speak with our community leaders on an ongoing basis. And so I think it's important to continue to listen. And I think that's what we're hearing, is that our community wants us to continue to look at what our next steps are, to create a package that is maybe more palatable and more acceptable and more forward-thinking than just going forward with this $24 million referendum, which we were talking about how do we get the most out of that referendum, knowing that cameras and certain things only have a certain life, and
Right.
Already trying to plan for that. And is it efficient to install certain things when ultimately the community wants to have a conversation about consolidation?
Right,
So,
right.
I think, I think that we've accomplished one of the steps that we intended to do. And that was to let the community know that we need to hear from you. We've got this question out here. Tell us. Give us your thoughts. And so those are in general my comments related to this. So.
Anyone else? Excuse me, anyone else?
Yeah, I have
Mrs. Szilagyi.
I have some comments. So I echo Mr. Peschel's comment that I am also comfortable stepping back with this. I know, not the last board meeting, but the one before that, I mentioned that my personal preference is to build new schools over some of the other things. I will also say that I was on the school perceptions survey. My own answer was that I was hesitant to invest in the safety and security because of some of these things we've talked about, the importance of building new schools. But the information that you have given us over the last 3 weeks since that time did help. So I'm grateful that we did that work, even if now we're going to slate it for a later day, because I think those details can help persuade people. So that was just my first comment. I have a couple more. For transparency's sake, when we talk about the plan, if I understand it correctly, it's pathway B that was recommended by the Facilities Advisory Committee. Is that correct?
That is, yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
I just want to make sure there's not something else out there that.
Nope. And if anyone goes to our website under Facility Advisories Committee and looks through the presentations, there are multiple presentations that have it articulated in there.
Mm-hmm.
Now remember, that hasn't been fully, like I said, it's about 85–90% because some of that was far enough down in the future. We didn't put a lot of energy on finalizing it yet because we knew there'd be a lot of steps between here and there, but it would not take long for us to do that.
Yeah, I agree. I watch those slideshows every week, or I guess every 2 weeks as you put them out. I would wake up excited the next morning to go and look and see what the Facility Advisory Committee had talked about. If you followed it, I don't know how many people are, nerdy about education policy as I am, but if you followed it, it was pretty clear that we were being very transparent. Pathway B is the plan we want to take. But I just wanted to make sure that that was out there. The last thing that I just want to echo, it's already been said, but I still think it's worth noting, that consolidation is best for students. And gosh, it's been 9 years since I was a teacher, but I think it's best for teachers too. When I think back to my teaching experience, and I had some classes with just 11 and 12 students, and I had some classes with 27. And honest to goodness, the classes with 27 were easier to manage for behavior purposes. If you were to ask me, and I taught in a big city with a lot of issues, what class size would you prefer? I would prefer a class that's a little too big to one that's a little too small. So I agree that really consolidation is what's best for students and that that's what we should focus on, but I just wanted to add that piece, that as a teacher, I also think, but sorry, I have a pause. I don't even think consolidating means that we will have bigger class sizes. I should clarify that. It doesn't.
It doesn't, yeah.
But for people that have that concern, that is what I would say, is that even if it did, I don't know that it will, I would take a class of 27 over a class of 12. allowed for more rigorous conversation, it allowed for better behavior. Students kind of police each other when there's behavior problems, and if there's only 10 other kids, they get a lot of attention too, you know, when they're acting up. So that's just been on my mind a lot lately, that this concern people have about big class sizes, I don't think it's reality. I don't think the class sizes will get bigger, and I don't think that a class size of 24 to 27 students is actually even a bad thing. So I just wanted to add that.
If I may, only
Yeah.
because it's based off past presentations and information that's out there. By having schools that have been consolidated, so that there are more sections available per grade level, or a larger middle school that allows us to offer more course offerings for our students, because we have enough students to be able to fill a course.
Right.
Whereas in middle school right now, if we don't, we just don't offer the course unless it's one of the essential courses that we have to offer. Oftentimes what ends up happening, Ms. Lodgy, is that, so for example, the class sizes, where we do have some classes that run hot at 27, and we do have some other schools where they run low.
Yeah.
And so by doing that and merging it together, what you start doing is you start right-sizing the classrooms, so that you're averaging that out. And when you have more sections or more first grade classrooms that are available, you know, you're getting away from just the one or two, but now you're starting to get to the 3 or 4 first grade classrooms. You have the flexibility in order to right size those classrooms and not run it really hot or really low.
Yeah.
So that is something that we've put a lot of energy and planning into, and exploring and really taking a look at. And we're pretty confident that that's what we're going to be able to do. As you recently heard from Dr. Gunlock, where he gave the example where we already knew between Smith School and Jefferson School, we were going to have 2 large 5th grade classrooms. But because we were able to do 3 sections, we now actually have 3 sections that are of moderate, you know, enrollment in each of those classrooms. In other words, they run a little bit more on the average end, rather than the high average end, or high end, period. So those are some of the benefits that are tied to looking at these schools. Just because you have a larger school does not mean you have larger classrooms. It means that you have more options available to right-size classrooms in order to deal with unique situations that may occur. Maybe personality conflicts, you know, between 2 students in a classroom. Rather than allowing it to escalate, we can resolve it differently, and hopefully in the future allow those 2 individuals to become friends. But rather than rubbing something and continuing to look for that friction, sometimes friends need a little bit of a break from one another. And so it provides for, that's just one example of so many different examples that we can give you. So that's, when we're talking consolidation, that's in essence what we're really talking about, is what's best for children. And how do we get to that? How do we get to that crux point of ensuring that we're able to provide services to our children that we can't do right now? Because what happens right now is, if little minor, and I'm doing an illustration, so no offense, but let's say Dave's in school, he's having a bad day today.
That does happen once in a while.
You know, and the behavior interventionist, this is not their day to be at that school. So what resources are we tapping on in order to provide support for Dave in order to recover from that event, to learn from that event, and to move on and to go from there? Rather, now we're taxing on other supports within the school that may or may not have the expertise in order to provide that level of intervention, proper intervention for Dave. And so as a result of that, we're in essence saying, Dave, sorry, you can't have a bad day today. You'll have to wait until Monday next week. Today's Thursday.
Does that work for you?
Yeah, that works great for me.
And so that's just one example. I talked about in the middle school level of course offerings. You know, there's some of our world languages that we're not able to provide because, quite candidly, because a majority of our middle schools are just too small. And because they're too small, we don't have enough students with interest in order to put a teacher there to offer a particular language that they may be interested in. German, Chinese. there's so many different things that are available out there. And again, by having more students that are in there, you can fill up those type of courses much easier, and it justifies the cost that's necessary, because with us spread out as far as we are, we're just spread too thin. We can't afford it. I hate to bring it down to dollars and cents, but we just can't afford it. And we're talking about facilities on average that are 78 years old, and the average lifespan of a facility is 50 to 60 years old for educational purposes. What was good for, even if you were to look at it, for example, like medication, what medication was available 50, 60, 70 years ago? Let's say 70 or 80 years ago, so we get to our average lifespan. That was cutting edge back then. Is it cutting edge now? And would you be willing to go back to something back then, knowing that there's better things that are out there that can better take care of you? So those are some of the conversations and examples that we're giving to our community as we're talking with them. You know, when we're talking about a school like Merrill, that was built before automobiles were on the road. Phones, not really sure what the phones were back then. But I know even the phones that we deal with nowadays versus when I was a child are drastically different. I'm not really sure I would go back to a rotary phone or even the push phone, the push button ones, you know, the digital phones. Things have changed, things have evolved. And our spaces have to be able to do the same thing in order to prepare our students for the future. And the longer we delay on this, the more our surrounding districts are continuing to update and continuing to offer those things. And our students, our families are going to choose to leave us and take advantage of those things. And the school district is an enormous economic developer and driver of this community. And we need, these are the messages that we're helping people understand. And it's because of the recency, i.e. recencies, you know, between last week and this week with some of our significant community members, that my recommendation to the board has been revised. So, Dr. Gunlock, did I miss anything?
No, I would just say, simply put, the formula for the largest class size possible is what we currently do. If we're going to continue to run a whole bunch of small schools and spread staff amongst a whole lot of small buildings, I can guarantee you the class sizes are going to be larger than you would in a more consolidated situation. Even at our schools that are 3 and 4 track, because that was one of the questions as I did the facility updates that staff hit me with. They said, we have some 3 to 4 track schools. They have some of our highest size classes. And I had to explain that's because the staffing plan is K-12. The staffing plan is across the entire district. So because we have some small schools that are running 1 and 2 track, that means the FTE is balanced out across all of them. So yeah, you're running hotter because we needed those FTEs elsewhere because we can't go lower than we are in those small spots. So by having, it is not an efficient design the way it is set up right now, and that will lead to the largest class sizes compared to any consolidation scenario. So.
I have a question. Other comments or questions?
I do.
Mrs. Carlin, thank you. Say Mrs. Stephanie.
Do we have an idea, if we wait and go make a decision for November, what does that price tag look like? Are we talking about that yet?
Well, the original plan was about $107 million for all of it. So it was $11 million for the school safety and security, $10 million for building infrastructure and maintenance. Now, some of that might be varied a little bit if we have some new facilities. And then to build a new middle school at the time was 59.6, and to build an elementary school or update, renovate existing elementary school was 26.7 million. So the total was 107.4 million. The price tag might be a little higher if you wait till November just because of inflation, but not significantly would be my guess.
Right.
And that whole package was 98 cents on the mill rate, so it'd be $98 on a $100,000.
Right. Well, I asked that question because Dr. Cartwright raised a question that I'm kind of worried about, which is our neighbors are going to referendum. Fond du Lac got one last year, Nina's going this year. And I'm comfortable waiting on this decision But meanwhile, our neighboring towns are passing referendums and building new schools, and so if we continue to wait, we're, getting behind on that. And so, would we be able to change the amount tonight if we wanted to talk about making a decision quickly? No? Okay.
We can't talk, because tonight is just whether or not we want to send this
To
one
this one?
through. Yeah,
Okay.
so we'd have to postpone this one
Right.
and then revise it with whatever we want to do in
Okay.
the future. Yeah.
Okay.
If the board chose to do that, as Ms. Schnorr actually updated me with some information, because we originally calculated the dates as to when you would have to notice it. We thought it was a date sometime next week. However, many board members were going to be at the annual conference.
Oh, yeah, that's right.
The date actually is Monday, January 27th.
If we want to push forward for it.
If you
April.
wanted to push forward for April. So I just want to make sure I'm adequately informing the board.
I worry if we push forward with April, though, that we won't give enough time to educate the community, and I'd worry if we go for all of it in April that it wouldn't pass. And I'd be worried if we get one no, how that might change the perception of our community.
Mhm.
I want to give the community enough time and enough education to be hands down, yes, of course we want this for our kids. We
Right,
want
yeah.
the best for the kids. We
Mhm.
want, does that make sense?
Yeah. No, I am comfortable waiting to go for it. I have been saying for a while that I'm really looking forward to this, 10, 20-year facilities plan where it's laid out when we're sunsetting certain schools and when we're building new schools. And, I think it makes sense to wait and go for one big referendum rather than all these piecemeal small amounts. And so when you look at Nina is going for over 100 million, Fond du Lac got 100 million, and Oshkosh is going to go for 25
24,
million.
yeah,
That's
yeah.
literally, our neighbors are going for referendums 5 times the amount that we're asking. And so I did have some hesitations in wondering, should we be going for the whole thing right away? And because I feel like sometimes community members, we say we have referendum burnout. We haven't had a referendum in 4 years. A lot of districts have had multiple referendums back to back for various things. So if we go to all these small referendums, then we would definitely have referendum burnout.
Right,
So,
yeah, I agree. Yeah.
so I think it makes sense to wait, but my hesitation is just that I really think we need to do this as quickly as possible because we are losing students and families to our neighboring districts. And every time you meet a new family that has 3 kids and they choose to live in Nina or Fond du Lac because they have a new high school or a new middle school, we lose out on 15 years of a per pupil per kid because when they don't move back. You get settled in school and they don't come back. So I will be looking forward to seeing that in the final tally for next November.
Well, time is always an important variable, and it's been a long time since the district, in my opinion, has had a long-range plan of 10, 20,
Yeah.
or 30 years in terms of its facilities. And I believe this board is committed to that. I believe the administration is committed to that kind of long-range planning. In some ways, I see it like what many of us do with our own homes. If we buy a home, maybe an older home, and we know that we're going to have to replace the carpeting, we may need to do something with the windows, and I don't know about the rest of you, but I don't do those changes all at once. I spread them over time, and I kind of prioritize them, and I see that's what we're doing here. We're prioritizing what are the needs of our facilities to meet the needs of our students moving forward, which then leads to, as Dr. Cartwright pointed out, the close affiliation between the business community and the school community in creating schools as economic drivers to bring people in, to educate workforces, and make sure that we have a viable workforce in our community, which is important to all of us, to make sure that we have a good place here to live, learn, work, and play. I'm comfortable putting a timeline, which I think is realistic at this point, given the input we've had from community members and parents and members of the business community saying, we want more information out there, and we want to see the whole package. We don't want to see just small pieces. And so I think, from what I'm hearing from administration tonight and board members, that a November timeline would be realistic at this point to move forward. I've also heard, in line with Mr. Peschel referring to this as an exercise in democracy, which I believe it is. Typically, the November election, which is a national election, whether it's for U.S. Senate or House of Representatives, or in this case also presidential, brings out more voters than an April election typically brings. I've been a poll worker at one of our polling places, and I know that the April elections typically bring out about 20% of the registered voters. However, an election in a November timeframe
And a
presidential year typically brings upwards of 50 to 60% of the voters. So as far as participation in the democratic process, a November timeline would allow us to hear from more voters, and also to educate people as to why the board wants to move in this direction at this time.
I don't know that we can, I agree,
Okay?
but I think tonight we just need to do, we can't agree on any of that, right? Isn't tonight just to vote for?
We're going to be
Okay.
voting, but I
Okay.
think we were putting
Yeah,
this in the
good, thank
context
you.
of
Yeah,
this
okay, I get
not
it.
just
Okay.
going away, but there
Right.
being some plan to address what we've been hearing from the community. Mr. Peschel?
I'm prepared to make a motion.
Okay?
So am I.
Okay,
Should we discuss
so,
it? Yeah.
I just, Jim's got his hands up and he
Yeah.
hasn't
Just
spoken
add
yet.
my little 2
Oh,
cents
I'm
here
sorry,
before we
Mr.
do
Peschel.
that.
Yes.
Mr. Evans, I didn't
Um,
see your hand. Sorry.
Not to repeat what everybody was saying, because everybody made some good points, I don't need to say it again, but I'm looking at our vision statement, where we will be the leader in education. I think if we were gonna follow that vision statement, there's no way we can't do that. Be the leader in education. And public education is a wonderful invention. Kids going to school today where those buildings were paid for by previous generations. And every generation has its time to take care of the next future generation. And I think it's our time to do that. So, now.
If I may.
Thank you, Mr. Evans.
Mr. Evans, I greatly appreciate you bringing in our strategic plan into this conversation, because quite frankly, when we were surveying our community and we were reading the comments and we were gauging where they were, and in the creation of our strategic plan, I think it's essentially important for people to remember, not only did they talk about equity, but in a lot of the questions, facilities either came up number one or number
Oh,
two,
yeah,
depending
that's-
upon the
yeah,
question and what it was, as a priority to be addressed by this board.
Yep, they did.
Thank you, Dr. Cartwright. That's a good reminder to us all.
Yeah. A good reminder what our mission statement is, too. Thank you,
Yes.
Jim.
All right, I believe we have a couple of board members.
It doesn't matter, I think.
You can go.
Yeah, I'm going to move I move that the motion be postponed indefinitely.
Second?
According to Robert's Rules of Order, such a motion needs a second, which we've had. It also will allow for debate, however, it cannot be amended. So is there any conversation, any questions or comments about the main motion, which would postpone the first motion, or the first resolution indefinitely?
Do we need to explain what that means?
Would you like to explain that?
Right, as maybe we explain to the public what that means. So it's not voting no, it's just voting that we're postponing this, this particular resolution so that we can bring it back to the table and discuss it at a later date. Is that my
No.
understanding? No.
No.
It kills the motion.
Oh, kills the
Com-
motion.
it completely.
Aye. Take that all back.
completely puts it down, so.
Don't copy that down. I
It's-
totally.
It's neither
yeah.
a yay or a nay, it
Right.
just kills the motion.
Yeah.
So that's just done, okay. So maybe Bob should explain it?
I think it's been done.
I'm so sorry.
So, I mean,
Strike that.
in essence, we are putting this resolution to bed. indefinitely.
Got it, okay.
And if we want to discuss a referendum or the following, or similar following question after that, we need to provide a new resolution for
Okay.
that to happen. So in essence, we're saying that this one doesn't work for us. Our conversation will guide what our next steps will be in regards to our response.
So same outcome, it's just different.
It's the same outcome,
Got
just
it. Thank you. Okay.
different lifespans.
I knew it was the right one to use. I just didn't know what I meant.
Is there any further discussion on the motion to postpone the motion on the floor indefinitely? Seeing none, please call the roll.
Peschel.
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Solaji.
Aye.
Solaji, aye. Carlin.
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Evans.
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner.
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted.
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Motion carried.
All right, we have a second resolution for this evening.
May I please ask a clarifying question related to this
Certainly.
next resolution?
Certainly.
Because this resolution was dependent on the first resolution, do we actually need to take it up?
That's a good question.
I believe so.
I
but
believe we
don't-
do as well.
And can we just motion to postpone that one also?
I think so.
Yes.
Okay.
On the agenda.
All right.
As a separate?
Right.
That's,
I think
that's
we
fine, I
have
just,
to vote
you know,
on
there
that.
were elements that were based on, you know,
Right,
the
and
other,
one
so that's
without
why I
the
asked
other
the
can't go
question.
without, yeah, that makes sense.
Okay. I know there's a provision to waive the reading. This is 3 pages.
Who's got that one?
But I'm willing to do that.
No, no.
Teresa, can you clarify for us what motion would need to be made in
Someone
order?
can just make a motion to waive the
Oh.
reading. It needs a second, and then.
I'll make a
Okay.
motion to waive the reading.
Second.
I was just saying, no one's seconding.
And then we vote on that? Correct.
Yes. Yeah.
Well,
To waive the reading.
to waive the reading.
To waive the reading, correct.
Go ahead. Solaji.
Aye.
Solaji, aye. Carlin.
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Evans.
I wanted to see you read all that.
That's what I just said, I just whispered to her, I said, if I say
Aye.
no, we're gonna be
Evans,
mad.
aye. Garner.
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog.
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted.
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel.
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Motion carried to waive the reading.
Okay, and just for the public's interest, this second resolution had been to set into motion the process to go forward with an April referendum on the $24.5 million that we had discussed earlier on safety, security, and infrastructure. All right, then we would need a resolution,
Motion
or motion, excuse me,
to move.
to move this, to move the original resolution and to second that.
Wait, don't we want to postpone it indefinitely?
Mhm.
You have to put it on the
Yeah,
table
it has
But
to
we
come
have
to the
to-
floor first.
It has to be on the table first.
Yeah, we just waived the reading. So I'll make a motion to move it.
Second.
Okay, so there's a motion and a second on the table, which does allow for conversation to postpone the second resolution indefinitely. Is there any discussion on that?
Hold on.
Hold on, yeah.
So at this point in time, the board, you have the floor in order to have any conversation related to Resolution 2, and/or for an additional board member to make a motion any other direction that the board would like to at this point.
Don't we just want to vote on this motion at this time?
You can, you can.
We would need a motion to postpone if that's the same direction
Well-
you're going.
So we're in the
Let's use the same
discussion.
language as the first one, if
Yes.
that's
Oh,
what you
okay.
choose
Yeah,
to do.
okay.
yeah,
Yes.
right.
Okay.
We're in the
No,
discussion.
All right,
Yes.
got it, okay,
No.
I'm sorry.
I know it was complicated,
All right.
not normal for us.
So we
Thank you,
have,
Teresa, for keeping us
we have
legal.
a motion and a second
To
to
discuss it.
discuss the resolution as written.
Go ahead, Bob.
And now, if someone wanted to move to postpone this indefinitely, that would be the next step, correct?
Right.
Okay.
Correct.
Well, can I just ask, does anyone want to discuss the resolution at this point? All right. Well, then I would make a motion to postpone this resolution indefinitely.
So moved.
Okay, now would be an opportunity for any discussion, debate, or comments,
The
questions.
motion, on the motion.
On the motion, correct. Doesn't look like it, so please call the roll on the motion to postpone
We don't do this often.
indefinitely.
Excuse us.
Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner?
Aye.
Garner, aye. Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Solaji?
Aye.
Solaji, aye. Motion carried.
Okay. So we're done then with our resolutions for this evening, is that correct? All right. We are not noticed to discuss anything else, although we do have 2 agenda items left. One is announcements. Does anyone have any announcements at this time? All right, seeing none.
Oh, I have one. I'm sorry.
I'm sorry.
I do have one.
All right.
I wanted to, I know that next Friday night that there are many of us that are going to be attempting to be on the trivia night, but there's also Oshkosh on Broadway going on that night and on Saturday evening. And I was informed this morning by Joe Furlow, the director of the Grand, that there is still opportunities for elected officials to be on the stage. And so
Do you want us to nominate you?
no, I'm already on the stage. I'm actually trying to encourage all of you to be on the stage. So there won't be a full council because they all have some of them have other things going on. And so I asked Joe if he wanted me to see if I could recruit some members of the school board to take part in the song that the council was going to do. And so so it would be myself, Mr. Mugrauer, Mayor Palmieri as council representatives, and Gordon Hintz and Christian Gossett are all part of this number, and it's I think it's So Farewell, Sound of Music. Is that the right? So, and I know that there's some complications to Friday night, but I've inquired as to what's the latest that we could be there on a Friday night, and it's 9 o'clock, which is right around the time that the trivia night might end, and it seems to be right across the street, about a block. And then there's Friday, and then there's Saturday night. But Joe indicated that if we do it, he wants to have everyone for both nights, not just
Right,
one
not
night.
just one night, okay.
So, you'll do it, both nights?
Yeah.
Okay.
If I can do it after trivia night, because we took first
That's,
last year.
that's the plan. I was still hoping to get on a team for trivia night, and then I was gonna go and do
After?
the performance at the Grand.
Is there a rehearsal?
There is a rehearsal schedule which I can provide to you. I think most of us might know this, some of us might know the song already. I don't know. I do. But just putting it out there, and you don't have to really say right now that you're gonna do it. Just reach out to me and I'll get you connected with the information that I have, and we'll go from there.
All
It
right.
doesn't have to be everyone either,
Okay.
so.
Thank you, Mr. Peschel. Are there any other announcements?
I think Jim has to do it.
He was looking for a way out.
I was gonna follow Allison out the door.
For Allison had a
She had
a-
important call at
yeah.
7.
But I was just saying that I was gonna
Yeah,
duck out.
she only left because of a conflict of meeting, no other reason.
You got it.
No, it
I might,
wasn't.
I just have to check my calendar.
Okay.
I don't know what. I don't have my personal calendar anymore.
Okay. Are there any other announcements?
Motion to adjourn?
Thank you. And we need a second. Please call the roll.
Evans?
Aye.
Evans, aye. Garner? Herzog?
Aye.
Herzog, aye. Olmsted?
Aye.
Olmsted, aye. Peschel?
Aye.
Peschel, aye. Solaji?
Aye.
Solaji, aye. Carlin?
Aye.
Carlin, aye. Motion carried.
Meeting is adjourned.
Man, did I mess that up.